possible temptation because of a few features seems extreme. They offer a legion of benefits, and their temptations may have some upsides, which seems odd, but let me explain. Almost every feature of a cell phone can have benefits, and taking away access to the possible beneficial resources could have more downsides than upsides. Despite cell phones having a bad reputation among adults and other teens alike, I believe that they have more benefits than most people think. Any good experiment requires variables, both independent and dependent, as well as a control. I luckily had the chance to revisit my personal favorite church camp I've been to, Snowbird Wilderness Outfitters, for the third time. The first time I went, I only had a smartwatch but no phone. The second time I had a phone but no smartwatch, and the third time I had neither, as my cell phone was collected. Going off of pure enjoyment of my time there, I enjoyed the third time the least. It certainly wasn't a torturous experience, but I did wish I had access to the tools available on my phone multiple times a day throughout my trip. The independent variable in the experiment was access to a cell phone or smartwatch, while the dependent was the enjoyment of the trip. The control group was the third time, as I had no access to either device. Throughout my third trip, I noticed a few things that cell phones could have added to my trip. After all, cell phones are for convenience, and life is easier when convenient. While the smartwatch provided a few of those things, the cell phone would have provided all of them. The first thing both me and my friend wished we had was a camera. A lot of people brought analog cameras to take photos, but we didn't own one. We simply used the most common form of camera currently available, a cell phone. And Snowbird is in Andrews, North Carolina, which is surrounded by majestic mountains, scenic streams, and vivid valleys. My friend had taken photography classes and would have loved to take beautiful pictures of the landscape. At the same time, it was the last time I was able to see that friend before I moved, and I would have wanted some pictures of him to remember him by. Analog cameras are also relatively large to carry around, just to take pictures, which is likely why cell phones have cameras in the first place. The second thing we wished we had was a flashlight. Almost everyone brought flashlights, but I didn't. I forgot that our cell phones would be collected, and I would have liked to not be left in the darkness. I am glad that Snowbird has lighted pathways and roads, or I would have just stayed in the cabin until morning. Normal flashlights have brighter lights and aren't that burdensome to carry, but it is more convenient to have it included with other things in one device. While a flashlight isn't that necessary, it still is nice to have. The third reason is for timekeeping. While watches are nice, I don't own one because I have a cell phone. Snowbird has one clock on campus, which is in the cafeteria, and it's only open during meal times. I once missed dinner because neither me or my friend owned watches. When you make a schedule designed around time, then taking away the most common way of timekeeping is, simply put, a dumb decision. I'm not saying that people who take cell phones are dumb, but I am saying that you can't tell someone to eat soup and then steal their spoon. Less than half the students on the trip owned watches, so very few people actually knew the time. The fourth reason why having a cell phone is better than not having one is money. Many students had debit cards used to buy food from the snack shack. I didn't know how much I spent at camp because I could only see my balance twice a day. I set a budget to keep to, like many students did, and I wound up not being able to make the most of my budget because I couldn't track my spending. It may be minor, but keeping track of how much money you have in this economy is tough if you just tap a card to a screen and don't know how much you just spent. A calculator is another reason to have a phone. While minor, sometimes keeping track of numbers is important. The fifth reason is for safety. We have the buddy system for a reason, but the amount of times most people break that rule is ridiculous, to not have redundancy. If a student gets stuck, injured, or lost, how would they be able to contact people? Most phones have trackers in them, which allows people to easily find lost persons. Snowbird Hostile Threat Safety Protocol requires that students be able to easily contact someone in case of emergency. It is legitimately dangerous to not allow students to have cell phones. Keeping track of more than 10 teenagers in an open environment requires emergency contact to be easily accessible. The sixth reason is because of contact. The amount of times me and my friends had to look all around campus for other friends make my legs hurt just thinking about it. The original reason for the cell phone was for easy communication between people. While one kid did bring a pair of walkie-talkies, they could only communicate with one other person. Cell phones aren't designed for games, they're designed for communication and convenience. If I could have called or texted my friends to meet me somewhere, I would not have had to climb up a mountain 3 times looking for them. Sending photos or calling parents are also important. Snowbird doesn't have a mailbox, that I know of, so writing to parents isn't really an option. I know church camp is supposed to be a place to get away from the stresses of the outside world, but excommunicating with parents for a week seems impossible for some kids. The seventh defense for cell phones is note-taking. We were told to bring a notebook to camp for a reason. If only we had a notebook that could fit in our pocket, but that would be too convenient. The amount of times I almost left my notebook in the cabin was ridiculous, so being able to take notes on my phone would have been extremely convenient. I'll also include bringing a Bible in this section because being able to just type in a passage and access the scripture is not only easy and convenient, but is also helpful for people who are new Christians and haven't learned all the books of the Bible in order yet. Being able to highlight and bookmark multiple passages is extremely good for remembering the important details and keeping focus. There are many other reasons to have phones. I'm going to include some of them in this paragraph. Navigation. Remembering the map of campus may be difficult for people who haven't been to camp before, and websites like Google Maps may help people navigate campuses. Scheduling. I'd only had a digital copy of Snowbird's schedule on my phone, so if I hadn't been there before, I wouldn't know when to do stuff. Sermon notes were also available on Snowbird's website, but we couldn't use those to stay focused. Vocabulary. The Bible contains many words that some may not understand, so being able to look up definitions may be helpful in some situations. Generally looking stuff up. I had at least one time at camp where I wanted to look up the quote, "Prejudice rarely survives experience," by E.B. Zibbert, but I couldn't remember who said that quote. Entertainment. While at Snowbird, there were many times where I was bored outside of Bible study or sermons. I could have played a game for a few minutes. Cell phones may have other practical uses that some people ignore to focus on them being possible distractions. At the same time I made these points, some will argue that cell phones provide temptation to play games or text friends during service, or that their games are creations of the devil meant to distract you from God. Even though the last one sounds crazy, I know people who believe it. Cell phones do provide temptation, but if 18-year-olds can't be expected to not play games on their phones in an environment actively designed to help you stay focused on God, then can they be expected to go out into a world full of temptation to stay focused on God? Many good things in life follow this idea, from vaccines to controlled burns, where if you're exposed to control small bits of bad things, then you learn to handle more bad things later on. By having the temptation of playing on your phone, you learn to ignore the small temptation, and in turn learn to ignore larger temptations in the real world. Every healthy relationship has some amount of basic trust. If a chaperone can't trust students with not using their cell phone for a few hours, then can the student trust their chaperone with their spiritual journey? After all, you get back what you get put in, and if you put in little trust in your students, they'll put little trust in you. I've also heard the argument that teens are addicted to their phones, which is a frankly hurtful stereotype. Oftentimes, if we are addicted to our phones, there's a deeper issue at play. Also, if you assume every teenager is the same, then you're going to be in for quite the surprise. In the words of Evie Zippert, prejudice rarely survives experience. If you've ever taken a diet to destroy your addiction to junk food, it may help, but it takes more than a week. By taking away cell phones for a week, you instead make the opposite effect. My entire trip, I could hardly pay attention to service because of how much I wished I had my phone. I rarely actually use my phone, but the listed reasons above made me wish I had it for pure convenience alone. I think relatively logically compared to most people, and I just couldn't get over the anger I felt to my mind. I felt I was being robbed of a useful tool. Now, if a student proves beyond reasonable doubt that they can't be trusted to not use their phone in service or in Bible study, then taking their phone is fine with me. Me and my friends just hate being stereotyped to death. Most of my friends and I likely wouldn't use our phones for anything but note-taking or reading scripture. Now, I'll admit, sometimes I do check my text if I'm texted during service, but normally I don't respond unless it's really important, and then go right back to my Bible app. Even with my ADHD, not even I would deliberately play a game on my phone during service. If someone does, I feel that it's their fault and that they have purposely chosen to fall into temptation. If they miss something important because they're on their phone, then that should be their problem. I'm personally a big advocate for play stupid games, win stupid prizes. Taking away cell phones may temporarily prevent temptation, but allowing students to resist the temptation prevents temptation for much longer. In conclusion, taking away cell phones at church camps or other overnight events may have benefits, but its drawbacks are likely much greater. Cell phones have a bad reputation for being the ultimate distraction, but if used responsibly, they can be much more of a help than a hindrance. In my opinion, taking away cell phones isn't a good idea due to many of the reasons listed above. Oftentimes, a student may be expected to have a cell phone, such as in Snowbird's lack of clocks on campus. Taking those cell phones may cause imposter syndrome among your students, and it teaches them unnecessary levels of dependence. Most of the students in older parts of a youth group are almost adults, and they need to learn the independence and responsibility that goes with having a cell phone. I don't need to tell anyone how to do their job, but I will support what I believe is right and just. It simply makes more logical sense to me to allow students to have cell phones at camp, which I will defend until proven wrong. Thomas Sowell once famously said, "It is hard to imagine a more stupid and more dangerous way of making decisions than by putting those decisions in the hands of people who pay no price for being wrong." And I believe that quote to be true in this situation. Chaperones pay no price for making a wrong decision. Their phones remain tucked away in their back pockets, while the students' phones remain locked away in a plastic prison. I really want to keep those who make decisions informed on the unintended consequences of their choice, and keep those in power accountable for their actions. Open-mindedness is something severely lacking in this world, and it is past due for a renewal. With brotherly love, Aiden Speedbump Hatter.